What's up, you guys? It's Chris. Today I'm going to show you how I turned this walnut tree into a beautiful bedside table. This walnut tree was leaning over the driveway and it kept dropping walnut trees onto the driveway, which would stain the driveway and land on cars, and it was just a big mess. You can see here we cut the logs into manageable sections and I take them away with the tractor and head up to the sawmill. Now, one of the great things about having a sawmill is I don't have to go spend big money on beautiful hardwoods like this black walnut here. It literally just came right off my family's property and I can mill it up and use it as a project. It's really satisfying cutting into these logs because every log is different and you really don't know what you're going to get as far as log quality and character in the boards until you cut it open. It's also just a lot of fun to be able to run the sawmill. So here's a rough SketchUp of what I want this table to look like. When I'm building a project like this, I kind of get rough SketchUp drawn up, but most of it's just in my head and I just kind of wing it as I go along. These walnut boards you can see are starting to split and cup a little bit. That's the one downside to having the lumber come off your own sawmills. You have to dry it out, and when you dry it out, it can crack and bow and twist, and it can be really tricky to get the wood to hold its dimension. Now, the sawmill leaves a rough sawn surface on the boards, so in order to smooth it out and to get a nominal thickness all the way across the board, I send it through the thickness planer. The thickness planer starts to uncover the true character of the board, and you can see here there's some pretty good chatoyancy in this board. After everything is planed, I cut the boards down to size and pay no attention to what I'm doing and take out my camera tripod, and yes, I broke it. Now, the sawmill also leaves a rough edge on the ends of the boards, so I run it through the table saw to get it cut down to size and to clean up those rough edges. So in order to have a piece of walnut big enough to cover the whole top of the table with one piece, I need to glue a couple pieces together. To do this, I use a tongue and groove joint, and I cut the tongue and groove on the router table. This here is the bit that cuts the groove, and then I change over to the bit that cuts the tongue. And now the pieces fit together nice and snug, and this tongue and groove is going to strengthen that joint and make the tabletop even stronger. Now, one of the boards that I use for the tabletop has a little bit of a split in it. This is probably just from the wood shrinking as it's drying out. To strengthen this, I decided to do what's called a bow tie to inlay it over the crack, and that strengthens it and keeps the crack from opening up even more. With the bow tie marked out, I head over to the bandsaw and cut it out. After it's cut out, I sand down the rough edges, and then I clamp down the bow tie over the crack and trace out the shape. Next, I use the router to route out the material so that the bow tie can be inlaid into the piece. I do this in 2 steps just to not overwork the router. I use a chisel to clean up all the edges right to my line, and then glue the bow tie into place and clamp everything up to let it dry. Once all the glue is dried, I remove the clamps and I cut off the rest of the bow tie. I very carefully hit it with the block plane, making sure not to gouge into the actual tabletop board, and then I sand it down flush. I rip down some boards and cut to length some stiles and rails for the faceplate of the cabinet. And here you can see all the components starting to come together to build the shape of the table. To join all the pieces together, I use a pocket hole jig. I have this Craig jig. I think it's called the 720 Pro pocket hole jig. And I'll tell you what, guys, I was not sure if I wanted to spend the money on one of these, but this thing is so slick. It works so well. It's definitely worth having if you guys want to get into woodworking and start doing some projects like this. And then I glue, clamp, and screw everything together. One of the great things about the pocket screws is once it's screwed together, it's staying in place. You can just keep working, as opposed to if you were using a biscuit joiner, you'd have to wait for the glue to dry and then you can keep going on your project. With the pocket hole jig, the screws hold everything together and you can just keep right on building. I use pocket hole screws on basically everything from the faceplate to the panels that build the box for the table. And I'm gluing and clamping, making sure everything's square as I'm putting everything together. So here's a look at the main part of the table. I think it's coming together pretty nice. I'm happy with it so far. So I decided to add a few more pieces to the tabletop. I wanted it to overhang on either end. So you can see I'm wrapping a 3/4 inch strip of walnut all the way around the outside of the tabletop. And this took just about every single clamp that I had. I hopped back over to the table saw to rip down some pieces for the table legs. I first ripped them square. Then I used this little jig that I built to cut a taper down each one of the table legs. This gives a little bit of a different look to the table rather than the legs coming down square. And this jig helps me ensure that each one of the tapers are exactly the same between the table legs. Now here's the one part I didn't use the pocket screws for. I just glued and used 18 gauge brad nails to hold the table legs together. With the dark walnut and the little dark hole that is left behind from the brad nail, you can hardly tell that it's even there. And I had no problem just using the brad nails for this. It was quick and it holds the table legs together just fine. I did, however, move back over to the pocket hole jig to fasten the table legs into place. I said it before and I'll say it again. This pocket hole jig is so slick. It's so nice just to be able to screw these right into place with glue in between the joint and just keep right on moving. So this is where we're going to end the first video in this series. I'm going to come out with another video next week where I finish up this table. I'm going to be building the drawer, installing the door slides. I've got some fancy stuff that I'm going to do around the tabletop, and I'm going to put one of the most expensive finishes I ever have put on a project on this table. I'm super excited about it. So follow along and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching. Bye.